I was fired for correcting the CEO's daughter's $68 million mistake. They called it undermining leadership. 2 weeks later, 76 clients walked out behind me, and their phones wouldn't stop ringing. My name is Selene Avery, and this is what happens when integrity meets entitlement and numbers don't lie, even when people do. I didn't plan on becoming the woman who got fired for correcting an executive's golden child, but here we are. I fixed a decimal, and the fallout burned like a flare across the whole firm. 2 days later, clients started calling me instead of them, and I learned the quiet truth about power. It follows trust. The morning it began, the elevator opened onto the 28th floor of North Star Metrics in Chicago, and the usual blend of printer ozone and stale coffee rolled out to greet me. I set down my tote, took sip number one from a travel mug that should have retired years ago, and woke my laptop. It was Q4 pitch day, the kind of high-stakes gauntlet where a single slide can swing budgets by millions and decide who gets invited to the next table. I'd been up until 1 a.m., rechecking my model for Helios Freight's omni-channel rebuild, conversion funnels, seasonality adjustments, the whole forest, and every tree. Every dollar in the deck had a receipt and a reason. At 8:42 a.m., a new file landed in my inbox. Updated final. Use this. Sent by the CEO's nephew, Brandon Vale. Freshly minted engagement lead at 25 and allergic to humility. My stomach tightened. Brandon's finals tended to be anything but. I opened the deck and scrolled to the cost runway. There it was. The line item for logistics media had jumped from $6.8M to $68 million, a zero that didn't belong, dressed up as confidence. One decimal, a landmine. If that number hit the board, Helios would either laugh us out of the room or sue us into next year. I checked the version history, no comment trail, no rationale, then checked my original, then the invoices, then my scratch workbook, because the only thing worse than being right too early is being wrong out loud. The numbers didn't lie. The conference room filled with the usual choreography, partners performing calm, associates arranging chargers like talismans, a skyline pretending it wasn't December gray. Brandon breezed in late, cufflinks winking, already narrating wins that hadn't happened. Helios's team arrived sharp and quiet, Maya Patel with the questions that land like darts, and her VP, a former operator who could smell fluff a mile out. The pitch flowed, market mapping, channel weights, pilots, and for a minute, I let myself breathe. Then the slide with the $68 million burn rate appeared, big as a billboard. Time slowed. I felt the heat in my face, the thud of my pulse, the choice pressing against my ribs. Keep still and let the number pass, or speak and risk the room going cold. Before we proceed, I said, steady enough to surprise myself, the logistics media line on this slide should read $6.8M. The extra zero is a formatting error from a late import. Our model, approvals, and vendor quotes all align to $6.8M. The air thinned. Brandon's smile snapped, the partners went statue still, and Maya's pen stopped mid-note. Thank you, she said after a beat, voice even but warmer than I expected. Let's continue with the corrected figure. Brandon coughed into his fist and clicked to the next slide like the page might bite him. We finished the deck, answered the hard questions, and shook hands, but the frost had already settled on my side of the table. Back at my desk, the silence felt crowded. I returned my laptop, logged my notes, and pretended not to see Brandon pacing into the CEO's office. At 4:13 p.m., I got the calendar ping, HR, 4:30, quick check-in. I knew what that meant. The conversation was all posture and paperwork, misalignment, tone, undermining leadership in a client-facing forum. I kept my shoulders level while they folded my career into a manila envelope, signed where they told me, and handed over my badge. Security waited with a box that smelled like corrugate and lemon cleaner. My plant, a framed photo from a client's warehouse visit, a chipped mug that said, "Make it make sense, 7 years reduced to 1 carry." In the lobby, the revolving door sighed me out into the street, and the city hit my cheeks like cold water. I should have felt wrecked. Instead, something steadier slid into place. I didn't have an office anymore, but I still had my receipts, my reputation, and the people who knew the difference between bravado and math. I pulled out my phone, opened notes, and wrote one line I didn't fully understand yet. This is the last day I trade truth for approval. Then I tucked my chin into my scarf and started walking, because if losing a job is a cliff, it's also a ledge you launch from when you finally stop looking down. The next morning hit different, the kind of quiet that feels staged, like the world's holding its breath before the next move. I sat on my couch with a mug that had gone cold half an hour ago, staring at the single cardboard box I'd brought home. It looked too small to represent 7 years of effort. The plant leaned slightly toward the window like it was trying to escape the same stale air. I powered on my personal laptop, opened a blank document, and just sat there until muscle memory took over. Numbers, notes, names, all the invisible architecture that had built North Star's success still lived in my head. I wasn't ready to use it, not yet, but I also wasn't ready to pretend it didn't exist. Around 9 a.m., my phone lit up, an internal memo someone forwarded anonymously. Leadership realignment announcement. Brandon Vale promoted to interim director of client engagement, effective immediately. Of course he was. My chest went tight, but it wasn't surprise, it was confirmation. The ink on my severance papers hadn't even dried before they rewarded him for wrecking a $62 million proposal. The memo called it a smooth transition. Translation: scapegoat removed, narrative secured. I scrolled further and found a quote from the COO, some empty line about innovation through fresh perspectives. I laughed once, out loud, the sound bitter and strange. My inbox pinged again, a text from an unknown number. Heard what happened. You deserved better. No signature, but I knew the rhythm, Maya Patel. My throat tightened. I didn't reply, just saved the number under Quiet Allies. By noon, LinkedIn was already carrying the news. Brandon's connections flooded his feed with congratulations, the comments a blur of fake enthusiasm. The same people who'd congratulated me last quarter for a 12% growth spike now pretended I'd never existed. Reputation evaporates faster than truth. Still, a few likes landed under an old post of mine, subtle acts of rebellion disguised as support. Then came the whispers, DMs from coworkers using throwaway accounts, half sentences about internal chaos, about how Brandon had no idea what to do with Helios once I was gone. One message stood out: they're scrambling to recreate your projections. He's using your model, but he doesn't understand it. I smiled, not from cruelty, but from clarity. That's the thing about cutting corners. Eventually, the math stops forgiving you. I opened my saved spreadsheets, every tab color-coded, every formula clean. It wasn't revenge I felt, it was ownership. My data, my structure, my mind. They could fire me, but they couldn't erase what I'd built. Still, the panic came in waves. No paycheck. No title. No safety net. I called my best friend, Lila, who worked at a PR agency downtown. You're too calm, she said after hearing everything. You just lost your job. No, I corrected softly. I lost my silence. She laughed, then went quiet, the kind of pause that carries approval. After we hung up, I drafted a short post on LinkedIn, nothing emotional, just factual. After 7 incredible years at North Star Metrics, I'm stepping away to explore new challenges and collaborations. Grateful for every project and partnership that taught me something real. I hovered over post, then clicked. It was subtle, professional, but the subtext was clear to anyone who knew. Within minutes, the notifications rolled in: comments, messages, cautious curiosity. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to grab coffee. Underneath their small talk lived a question they didn't dare ask: what really happened? By evening, my post had spread across our network. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at the wet shimmer of downtown lights reflecting off the pavement. Somewhere in North Star's glass tower, Brandon was probably basking in his temporary glory, oblivious to the quiet momentum building outside his control. Every empire underestimates the silence right before the shift. I leaned back, exhaled, and whispered to no one, let them talk. Because for the first time in years, I didn't need to defend my worth, the proof was already moving quietly toward me. By the end of that week, my name was still echoing in conference rooms I no longer had access to. Whispers have their own half-life inside companies. They decay slowly, but never disappear completely. Friday morning, I was halfway through a grocery run when my phone started vibrating nonstop. First a text from Lila, check the news. Then an email alert from an industry feed I used to manage updates for. Headline, Helios Freight halts North Star contract after financial discrepancy. The words seemed to pulse on the screen. I ducked into my car, groceries forgotten, and opened the full article. The $68 million miscalculation had reached the client. Their board had launched a formal audit, and North Star's oversight was being reported to both investors and regulators. Brandon's quote was featured, some polished line about unforeseen data migration issues that anyone with half a brain could smell as panic. The story spread fast. By noon, every analytics firm in the city had shared the post. My pulse pounded, not with fear this time, but with vindication. Truth, apparently, had better timing than revenge. Still, part of me ached. I didn't want their downfall. I wanted their honesty. But honesty doesn't trend. It burns quietly until someone lights the match. I spent the afternoon watching LinkedIn chatter unfold like a live feed courtroom. Recruiters posted think pieces about data integrity, analysts speculated about internal cover-ups, and former clients began commenting beneath North Star's crisis statement, asking direct questions no PR team could answer fast enough. The silence between their replies was louder than any confession. That night, my phone rang again. Damian Holt, my old mentor from an earlier job, a man who'd always seen through corporate polish. They're unraveling, he said without greeting. If you're smart, you'll stay quiet and let the gravity pull everything where it belongs. I'm not doing anything, I said, staring out at the rain-slick street below my apartment. Exactly, he replied. That's what makes it powerful. After the call, I poured myself a drink I didn't really want and opened my files again. My models, my analytics, my notes, they were still intact, clean, untouched by the chaos outside. Somewhere between the formulas and client timelines, a new idea began taking shape, not retaliation, not even rescue, just reclamation. By Monday, my LinkedIn inbox looked like a switchboard on fire. Former clients, vendors, even journalists from trade outlets wanted off-record insight. I ignored most of them. But one message stopped me. Can we meet? Maya Patel, Helios Freight. My heart thudded once, hard. I typed back before I could overthink. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Pike and Pine Cafe. That night I barely slept, running through every version of what she might want, clarification, collaboration, or closure. The cafe was half empty the next morning, steam fogging the windows as rain painted streaks down the glass. Maya arrived right on time. Sharp suit, umbrella dripping, eyes calm but watchful. You warned them, she said after ordering her coffee. And they ignored you. I confirmed it. I said nothing. They blamed you in the internal memo, she added, sliding her phone across the table. On the screen was a leaked paragraph. Former lead analyst failed to maintain version control, resulting in client confusion and financial risk. My throat tightened. They hadn't just erased me, they'd rewritten me as the cause. Maya's gaze softened slightly. That's why I called. We're moving vendors. I want your input on who's competent out there, someone like you or you if you're interested. The offer sat between us, quiet and heavy. I felt the words in my chest before I spoke them. I'm not building someone else's ladder again. She nodded slowly, a half smile curving her mouth. Then build your own. When she left, the chair across from me stayed warm for a long minute. I stared at her empty cup, then at the gray water running down the window, and realized I was done surviving on borrowed air. The betrayal wasn't the decimal or the firing, it was the lie they wrote after. And I was done letting other people narrate my story. I woke before dawn with that strange stillness that comes right before something shifts, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to catch up. My coffee steamed on the counter while I sat at my kitchen table, reading my severance letter one more time. No anger this time, just analysis. Every clause, every restriction, every trap disguised as courtesy. I opened my notebook and wrote Damien's words in the margin. You can exist. Exist loudly. That was the line between fear and freedom. By 7:15 a.m., I had a list scrawled across the page: find a neutral space, register the LLC, build a website, create a name that belonged only to me. At 8:40, I signed for a tiny office in the West Loop, a single desk in a shared suite with creaky floors, peeling brick, and one stubborn door that jammed every time you tried to close it quietly. But it was mine. No glass walls, no silent watchers, no ghosts of hierarchy. Just air and room to build. I unpacked my laptop, set the little plant from home beside it, and wrote the first note I would ever hang on my new wall: build ladders, not pedestals. Naming came next. North Star had always sounded like a direction someone else chose. I wanted something grounded, something that spoke of light you build yourself. Signal Harbor Analytics. The name clicked in my chest like a lock turning. At 9:30, I had a bare-bones landing page live, clean, simple, a single line that said what I did and 3 bullet points that said how. Beneath it, a form linked to a brand new inbox I promised not to check too often. By 10:20, of course, I was refreshing it every 5 minutes. The first message arrived before noon from a vendor who'd worked under my accounts. If you ever go independent, we'll vouch. I typed a reply 3 times before settling on neutral ground. Appreciate you. Exploring options. I'll keep in touch. Exist, don't chase. At 12:10, Lila texted me a screenshot from LinkedIn. Brandon Smug, Leadership is Resilience, post paired with a photo of the Chicago skyline. I didn't answer. I just saved it to a folder I'd titled Weather Reports, because some storms forecast themselves. Then, at 12:48, my inbox lit up with a new subject line: Independent Availability? The sender: Helios Freight Procurement. My pulse jumped. I read the email twice. Their tone was cautious, but clear. They were evaluating short-term analytic support during vendor transition. Translation: they were done waiting for North Star to fix its own mess. My response had to be flawless, legally clean. I wrote slowly: thank you for reaching out. I can confirm availability for independent analytics projects and can scope engagements unrelated to any proprietary materials developed at a prior employer. I added a sentence about transparency, reviewed it 6 times, and sent it. Then I sat back and listened to my heartbeat echo through the room. At 2 p.m., Damien called. Posture check, he said. Neutral, I replied. Good. Keep it that way. They'll bluff next. Legal letters, noise, all theater. Call me first, react never. He hung up, and 15 minutes later, prophecy delivered. An email from North Star's counsel dropped into my inbox, polished and venomous. We are aware of recent events suggesting interference with client relationships. Reminder: your agreement prohibits solicitation or inducement for 12 months. The word inducement pulsed on the screen like a live wire. I forwarded it to Damien without comment. His reply came back in under 3 minutes. Sit tight. You've done nothing wrong. They're scared, not smart. The tension drained out of my shoulders like water. I closed my laptop, opened a new document, and titled it Signal Harbor Playbook, V1. 0. 3 rules emerged almost on instinct. Proof, pace, protection. Proof: back everything with evidence, no guesswork, no noise. Pace: steady progress over spectacle. Protection: set boundaries in writing, always. I stared at those words until they felt carved. At 5:20 p.m., my calendar pinged. Maya Patel, 15-minute call. She appeared on screen, tired but composed, the faint sound of a printer whirring in the background. We're moving vendors next week, she said. I can't put you on contract yet, but I can greenlight a small pilot. Quietly. My voice stayed calm, though my pulse didn't. Pilot works, I said. I'll send a 1-pager tonight. She smiled, almost conspiratorial. Keep it clean. No logos, no shade. When the call ended, I sat still for a long moment, palms pressed to the desk, feeling the air steady around me. Outside, the city had turned gold, the glass catching the sunset in soft flashes. I drafted the 1-pager carefully: scope, timelines, delivery terms, nothing emotional. Sent at 7:08 p.m. sharp. Then I stepped out into the chill night air that smelled like cinnamon and rain, and for the first time since HR escorted me out, I didn't feel like someone who'd lost. I felt like someone who'd started. North Star could send letters, post quotes, rewrite history, but I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was building something that didn't need their permission to exist. The next morning started without hesitation, no alarms, no dread, just motion. The sky over Chicago was the color of brushed steel, the kind that makes the city feel like it's bracing for something big. I arrived early at my new office, coffee in hand, the sticky door giving its usual protest before it clicked shut behind me. My inbox already pulsed with movement, a message from Maya confirming the pilot had been internally approved, and another from Helios's procurement team asking for a kickoff timeline. It was happening. I'd barely taken a breath when a headline flashed across my phone. North Star Metrics faces client exodus amid contract disputes. My stomach tightened, not from guilt, but from the surrealness of watching the storm unfold from the outside. The article quoted anonymous sources close to the company, describing leadership chaos, late filings, and data inconsistencies under review. I didn't need to read between the lines to know who they were talking about. Brandon's photo sat beneath the headline, smiling like the story wasn't already his obituary. My phone buzzed again. Lila. You seeing this? You're trending. I opened LinkedIn, and there it was, post after post from clients, vendors, and analysts dissecting the same meltdown I'd once feared would bury me. Hashtag North Star collapse was climbing. Someone had leaked internal screenshots showing Brandon's miscalculations, along with an email from the COO calling it a manageable misunderstanding. The internet didn't agree. Memes were circulating, graphs exploding, zeros multiplying, captions reading, "Manage this." I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was distance. This wasn't my victory, it was their consequence. Still, the shift was undeniable. My own inbox flooded with messages that afternoon, consultants looking to collaborate, ex-colleagues quietly reaching out, clients asking if I could take a quick look at pending audits. I answered only those I could handle without crossing any legal lines, careful and deliberate. At 1:22 p.m., Maya called. "You're seeing the fallout, right?" she said, her voice part disbelief, part admiration. "They're unraveling in real time." I leaned back, staring at the amber light crawling across my desk. "Truth does that," I said. She exhaled through a small laugh. "The board wants stability. You've got 3 weeks to prove what North Star couldn't." When the call ended, I looked around the tiny office, the plant by the window, the faint hum of the heater, the quiet rhythm of something finally working, and felt the calm before momentum. By mid-afternoon, the pilot had officially launched. It was just one project, modest in scope, but solid enough to stand on. I built dashboards from scratch, documented every query, labeled every assumption. Proof, pace, protection, my new religion. At 4:40 p.m., Damien called with a tone I hadn't heard before, something between pride and warning. "They've sent another letter," he said. "More bark than bite. They're trying to blame you for the client losses." "Let them," I said quietly. "Every zero tells its own story." He laughed once. "That's my girl." When we hung up, I opened my spreadsheet, the one where I tracked everything, and next to pilot, Helios Freight, I added a note, "Delivered without noise." Evening dropped fast, the skyline bruised with purple and gold. I stood by the window watching office lights blink on across the loop, one floor at a time, a reminder that life always keeps working somewhere. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but thank you for speaking up." We were all too scared. No name, no title, just gratitude from someone still inside. I smiled faintly and locked my screen. The truth was, I hadn't done any of this to bring North Star down. I'd only refused to keep it standing on a lie. But lies collapse loudly, and I'd simply stepped out of the way. As the city quieted beneath the hum of late trains, I turned back to my desk and scrawled one new line under the playbook taped to the wall. "Courage compounds, just like data." It wasn't revenge anymore. It was rhythm. Signal Harbor had officially entered the current, and for the first time in months, I wasn't running from the story, I was writing it. 2 weeks later, the noise finally crested. North Star's implosion wasn't gossip anymore, it was data. Reports, audits, screenshots, resignations. The company that once branded itself as precision-driven had become a punchline. I was reviewing the Helios contract in my new office when the phone rang. Richard Vale. His voice carried that brittle edge of someone used to power but stripped of control. "Selene," he said, weary, deliberate, "I think we both know how this looks." I watched the city shimmer through the window. "It looks accurate," I replied. He exhaled sharply. "You've made things very difficult for people who once supported you." I almost laughed. "If support means silence, I'm fine without it." He tried again, quieter this time. "You burned every bridge." "No," I said, "I just stopped letting you walk across mine." The pause that followed was long and jagged, the sound of realization hitting him like a slow collapse. "You'll regret this," he murmured, voice cracking. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll regret it on my own terms." I ended the call. No anger, no thrill, just an ending that had waited too long to arrive. The room was still. My monitor glowed softly, Helios's signed partnership blinking in confirmation. I leaned back, breathing in the quiet. On the screen beside it, a notification popped. Signal Harbor Analytics featured in the ledger, the analyst who chose integrity over obedience. I smiled faintly, not because of the headline, but because I finally recognized myself in it. Outside, the rain started again, steady, silver, familiar. I watched the drops trace slow paths down the window, each one carrying away a piece of the past. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was renewal, clean and earned. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and whispered into the stillness, "Truth always invoices." Then I walked out, leaving the city glowing behind me, my story finished exactly where it should on my own terms.